those were things that you couldn't have planned for. We knew we had a good architect who knew the rules. We're 99% complying, and council was in support of it from day one. But it was these things that came into play, and you just had to be prepared for it.
You are listening to the Property Developer Podcast, your home for tips, ideas and inspiration to help take your developing to the next level. Now here's your host, Justin Getty.
Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the show. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're well. I'm doing fine. Been busy chipping away at my projects, and I've got another great guest coming up for you today. A Sydney-based developer who's taking an unusual pathway in terms of the types of projects she is tackling. Before we get to that, here's a quick update on what I've been up to. So the public notice period is over on my project going through planning, and I was somewhat relieved to only get 4 objections to our proposal. And they all relate to the unusual crossover alignment that cuts across the road reserve out the front of the neighbouring property. This strange crossover alignment was something council requested us to do, so it's an interesting outcome. But there were no comments about the style or density of our project. However, council still has some concerns about what we are proposing, so we're working to address these issues before they make a decision. On my other project, the work on construction documentation continues. On the engineering front, we are working through what type of foundations would be best. Raft slabs seem to be the best option, but we are also exploring whether waffle slabs may be better. So there is a conversation going on between the engineers, architects and builder to sort that out. And the basic 3D modelling of the site has been done by the architects, so you can start to see how the built form is going to look across the site. Which I always enjoy because you can really start to see how the project is going to look. And we have just about finalised the interior design after a bit of back and forth about what would be suitable for the local market. I've also been having regular discussions with our selling agents about what's happening in the market, what buyers are looking for, and how we can best position the project for sale. The essential message seems to be that it's tough out there. Buyer levels are down and there is general caution among prospects, with off-the-plan sales being particularly challenging. Okay, don't forget, if you are interested in learning how to develop property, then email me about the Property Developing Mentoring Program that is available to help you get started. There's nothing like a guiding hand to show you the best way when you're starting out. So email me, justin@propertydeveloperpodcast.com, and I will send you some further information. Alright, on to today's guest, Davina Wong. Davina is a Sydney-based developer with a very interesting story to share. She's certainly taken a different approach to developing property and has cleverly worked a number of different angles in terms of project types and how you make them work. Forget about sticking to one project type and staying with it for a few projects for this developer. I think you'll enjoy how Davina isn't afraid to try new things, how you can pivot if something doesn't go the way you planned, and how she negotiates her way through challenging situations like securing an option agreement with neighbours. Keep an ear out for how Davina explains the importance of understanding your limits and risk tolerance and how you can still achieve results through partnering to help mitigate risk. I started off by asking Davina about her favourite food, and it was slightly unusual.
Probably kimchi, although I'm not Korean. I love Korean food.
That sounds like something my wife would say.
It's very random, but kimchi is actually a superfood.
Yeah.
It's good for you, and we try and make a once-a-year trip to Korea just to eat Korean food, and kimchi seems to be the staple food in all the Korean restaurants. So love kimchi. So yeah, I probably would eat till I'm sick.
And wash down with a nice glass of kombucha.
Yeah, some Asian beer.
Yeah, I think that's actually the healthiest response I've ever had on the show. And why Korean food? And where's your interest from that come from?
I think it's grown over the years where I used to like Japanese food, then you evolve to Thai food, and then evolve to Korean food. It's just the taste buds that you grow to get the strong taste, like spicy food.
Yeah.
And Korean food, the Korean barbecue, and some of them are quite spicy. So yeah, I love the spicy food. And,
okay.
and with the cold weather, you have barbecue outdoors as well, on the street side. So that's pretty good as well. That's, with the wind blowing, and then you're cooking barbecue on the side of the road. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds pretty good. Yeah, roadside barbecue street food usually is pretty good.
Cheap and nasty.
Yes. So we're here today to talk about your developing projects. So can you give us a bit of a background on who you are, how you got into property development and the kind of projects that you're doing?
Yeah, so in terms of property development, it wasn't something that we jumped in straight away. It's actually me and my husband, then partner, he's now my husband, but we started off property investing. I think like most people do, it's the easier way to get in is to invest, buy and hold. It's safer. So we started off investing. I read a lot of books and magazines. I think Your Investment Property was one of those books I started off with. And after a couple of years, we got a bit impatient with the growth, just waiting around. So we decided to manufacture our own growth, and we then evolved into property renovations. And after a few years of property renovations, we thought the margin was a bit tight, and a lot of other people were also doing renovations. So there was an opportunity one day where we saw a renovation deal that could be subdivided, and it was actually a house. So using the skill that we had with the renovation background, we actually renovated the house and put a wall in between the house, and that's when we got into property development and have been addicted to, I guess, the margin that property development brings. In terms of the stress and hard work that you go through for property renovations, whether it's cosmetic or structural, it's the same amount of stress that you would go through for development. So in terms of risk and reward, you might as well, put yourself into development. And so that's why we're now mainly concentrating in development. So from there, from a subdivision, we moved on to working on a 6 townhouse site, 49 bedrooms boarding house. Those are the new generation boarding houses. We've rezoned land as well, where we saw an opportunity. There was a house that we bought, and that was the land that was a bit of an abnormally. We saw an opportunity to rezone that particular land. We rezoned that particular street, and everyone got the benefit of it. And we rezoned it from R3 to R4. So there was a bit of a paper pushing. So development is an exciting space where it's not just straight go in, make something pretty. It's actually a lot of strategies that you can do in development, and the rewards that you get is quite large. And some people might say it's riskier, but I think if you know the right strategy, it's actually less risky, because there's a lot of other strategies that you can do, like options or paper pushing just to get a DA through and not build. Those are some of the things that are less risky compared to buying a house. You're stuck in there and you actually have to lodge a DA and knock down a few walls and renovate it. And then when it's not right, then you're stuck with that product. So that's why we've evolved and moved from, investing, then renovation, cosmetic, structural, then now into development.
Yes, well, I often say that we did a renovation at our house about 12 months ago, and I did some of the work, and I was reminded again why I much prefer doing property development than renovations, as it's hard work. So,
same amount of hard work.
Well, it's dusty and messy, and I think I much prefer delegating to other people to do painting and getting things fixed. So I can understand where you're coming from. But what sort of time frame are we talking of moving from property investing to then developing?
Look, I think some people move faster. For us, it was a gradual journey. So it wasn't like when I started off in property that I knew I was actually going to get into development. I didn't know I was actually going to be a developer. For us, the timeline was we had a good go at the buy and hold strategy for, say, about 4 years, and we weren't quite happy with the growth. After about 3 or 4 years, you're not seeing the growth. You start thinking, change strategy. And that's when we moved into renovations. So renovations are now another, say, 4 years. And then we stumbled across and evolved into development. And we've been doing development for the last 4 years now. And time just fly when you think about when you first started.
Well, time moves slow when you're doing development. That's the one downside. It does take a bit longer than a renovation.
Yeah.
So what was the first property development project that you tackled? Was it the 6 townhouses, or was it the land rezoning?
In terms of development?
Yep.
Yeah. The first development would be the rezoning. Again, it was something that we bought and we saw the potential, but we also have a few exit strategies. So had that not worked out, we would have either lodged a DA for a duplex or block of units, or we would just renovate the house and hold it, for example. So, but the plan A worked out. We lodged it was not so much a DA, it was more like a proposal to council using a private town planner to argue and to tell them that why that land should not be an R3 and that it should be an R4, our house as well as the ones next to us. And from that, within about 3 years, or might be less, 2.5 years, we doubled our money. And that house actually took a long time to sell. It took about 4 or 5 months to sell. No one wanted the house. It was actually a derelict house, and we basically had a quick cosmetic renovation so that we could rent it out for a decent amount of money. And we were also lucky that that particular site had a huge garage at the back, so we were able to then rent out the garage as well. So all in all, we were quite neutrally geared while we were holding that for 2 years while we rezoned it. Okay. So that was just one of our first ones. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you just talk me through a little bit more about that? I'm not familiar with your zoning up in New South Wales.
Oh, yeah.
What R3 to R4? What's the difference of that? What size block of land are you talking? Just give us some basic idea of what you were looking at.
Yeah, so the land is not that big. It's about 670 square meters.
Yep.
It's in Canterbury. I'm not sure if most people in Sydney would know Canterbury is about 12 to 15 kilometers into the city. So it's still very metro Sydney. And it was zone R3, and it was the last block on the street. R3, you can only do townhouses or duplexes, and R4, you can continue to do townhouses, but you can probably fit more townhouses because you get higher FSR, so floor space ratio. Mm-hmm. So with an R4, you put more townhouses, or you could do units. So R4, you can definitely do units, so higher yield, whereas an R3, you couldn't put units on it. And same with units, you can also do boarding houses, again, further increasing your yield. So with that particular deal, the whole street was zone R4, and that house at the end was R3. So we saw the potential of pushing that and arguing with council why that last house should be an R4. It was probably left as an R3 many, many, many years ago for whatever reason. But we argued that it's no longer necessary to be an R3 site. So we got it through in 2 years. And the DA, well, not the DA, the cost of our town planner was about $5,000. It wasn't even much compared to, say, if you're a full-blown DA. So, yeah, that was a good win.
And so what gave you the idea to do that? Were you seeking out that particular kind of property with an R3 zoning, or was it just serendipitous that you came across it?
Look, I guess we do a lot of education courses, and we actually have a lot of, I guess you can say, tools and strategies in our tool belt. And every time we see a potential, we'll see what sort of strategies we could utilize, and that's something that we came across. And we weren't actually looking for that sort of deal, because that sort of deal is actually quite rare. To find something that, the last one is an R3 is rare. It was something that we came across, and we remembered some of the things that we've learned in the past, that, hey, we could potentially rezone ourselves. So that's how it came about. But we weren't seeking for that particular deal per se.
Yeah, and even 2 years is a fair amount of time to go through that process to get it changed over.
Mm.
And did you say it doubled in value?
Yeah, we doubled that in value. We bought it for about under $700,000, and then we managed to sell it for above 1.3.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice project. You can't
just
find those all the time.
No, they're rare. They don't come along that often. But I think if you have the right information in your tool belt and something comes up, you know what to do with it, then the opportunity is there. I think luck plays a part, but also you got to have that knowledge to do that.
Yes, very good point. And then what was next? What was the next project? The six townhouses?
No, the next one we did was actually a subdivision. So we were doing a lot of cosmetic renovation, and then we moved on to structural renovation. So we were doing, that was our main thing, was structural renovations. And then we came about a site where we saw the potential of subdividing it. But there was no guarantee with development, as we know. But we thought, okay, there were a few exit strategies. So if we couldn't get the subdivision, we could do what we normally do, which is structurally renovate the house and sell it off and flip it, right? So this was a deal where we were quite comfortable in, where we were going to go in and structurally renovate it. But while we were lodging the DA to structurally renovate it, we also lodged a DA to subdivide the site with the house on it. And in the beginning, we got knocked back. And I remember at that point in time, I tried to understand why council rejected it. Sometimes it's good to always understand that no is not usually the final answer. So we went back to council and try and understand why they rejected us so coldly. And after we found out a few things, they don't really tell you exactly, especially in the area where I'm working in Sydney. There are certain councils very difficult to understand, and they don't really tell you why they rejected you. So after gauging a bit, you kind of understand why.
I think that's a universal problem.
Yeah.
Trying to understand councils.
Yeah, try to understand. So after gauging a bit, we kind of could read, between the lines. We lodged the DA, and we got it through the second time. We able to subdivide it. And so again, that
was 1 into 2?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was 1 into 2.
And so what were the issues that council had that you were able to overcome?
So I guess a lot of objection. So when there's a lot of objection on the street, especially when you're subdividing in a low density area, council would straight away reject for very what's the reason? No reasons, really. Some of the reasons that didn't even make sense to my town planner. And when we read that letter, it was more just an excuse just to palm us off, to tell us to just withdraw the DA. So one of the things was we wanted to go a double story to Torrens Title 2 homes. We decided to not go double story, and we just, comply with everything except for the subdivision. So that was the part that we weren't exactly complying, was the minimum lot size. But we had a good town planner that could help us to present a good case why it should and can be subdivided. And because we met most of the council requirement, we managed to get it through. So I remember reading the DA approval where the council addressed all the objections from the council, and they were at the end very supportive of that subdivision.
Oh, that's good. And were you using the same town planner that you used on your other rezoning project?
Yeah, it's the same town planner. He's a unique breed, like they call it, a town planner / architect. So they could design houses for you at the same time to understand the town planning rules, as opposed to someone who's just an architect and then they have to go and outsource for a town planner to then support the case. So in this case, we were lucky that we found a architect / town planner that understood the area in which we're working in.
And was that someone that you just found over time through your other projects?
I guess it's over time with other professionals. So it was we had used other architects in the past, and we weren't exactly too happy. They were fine. They did a good job, but when we were, we're always looking for someone new, someone better. So we actually asked a solicitor, and he referred us to this particular architect, and we were happy with the results, and so we continued using him, and we're still using him today in our current project.
Have you got any tips about getting those A players on your team? Is there any little secrets that you can share with us, or how you go about it?
Yes. I think a good one to start with is referrals. I think a good referrals is one. Second one is reading up on your local DAs. So if you've seen a project that you've walked through the open house and you like what they've done, look up the DA on that council website and try and find out which architect did the work, and then have a chat to them and see whether it's someone that you want to work with. In fact, that's one thing that I know not many people do, and I found a lot of good architect through looking up DAs. In fact, the boarding house one, it's a different architect because not all architects can do everything, right? They're specialized. So the boarding house one, I actually have to start from scratch. So with that one, I actually found this architect because they were working on a block of units across the road. And I read up on the DA, and they actually went to court and won in an environmental court. And so when an architect has actually won an environmental court, they know what they're doing. So I approached them, and I found out they're actually, as per another agent said, a gun in the industry for boarding houses. So that's actually a very, very good way to find out is through your local council website's DA. Try and hunt them down.
Yes, I agree. That's a really rich source of how you can find good people who should understand or do understand the intricacies of that particular council that you're looking to work in.
Yeah, I guess referral is good, but I have heard stories where referrals end up quite pear-shaped. And I think I've heard a few stories now, which is a bit sad. Usually when people refer you a consultant, you should be, okay. But I heard, now there's a few stories, and I'm not sure, is it because sometimes there's these BNI meetings where I think they have quotas that they have to meet, that they have to refer a certain amount of business to the people within the network, for example. So sometimes I think there's that issue. But I think if you go to the council website, they're familiar with the council, they've got it through at a reasonable amount of time. They didn't take like 2 years to get a DA through. They took 6 months or 9 months. That they know what they're doing. It's proven track record.
Yeah, so we might come back to the self-contained units or the boarding house shortly, but just going back to the project that you then got the DA for the subdivision, what happened there? Did you build that one out, or what happened?
Yeah, so we built that one out first, so 1 year to get the DA, and then the second year to build. It took longer than expected because the builder had some issues, like most developers have, builders. But we were lucky that the market held up. It didn't dive during the delay. But all in all, it was a 2-year project. We sold it off, and we made about 44% margin on that. I think we were rewarded with a good margin because that site wasn't, I guess, what's the word? It's not something that people know that you could subdivide. Sometimes if you look at a site, if everyone knows you can subdivide it, that's when people will be paying a lot of premium, and then you end up bidding for that premium. But for that site, we knew the market very well, and we knew what can be pushed with council, and that's how we were able to get that higher margin for that development.
And so did you knock over the existing house, or did you build on the back?
We built at the back, so we gutted the house at the back. We kept most of the walls, actually. We just basically did an extension.
Okay. And so what was the delay with the builder?
Unfortunately, it's a builder that we've used before, and he was quite good. But unfortunately, with this particular builder, we think he expanded too much, and he took on a huge job with another developer, and they end up going to court. It affected our development because we were caught in the middle of it. So in the end, we just had to manage the timeline with him and just had to micromanage him a bit. And we were lucky to actually get across the line and got it finished. So I guess live and learn.
I think that's a big part of developing is living and learning.
Yep.
And so then what was the next project after that?
The project after that, we then went on to working on an 6 townhouse development. We put that under an option.
So tell us a bit more about that. What was the size of the land? How did you find it? How did you get the option working?
Yeah, so we actually was referred to that site. There's a particular person that we knew on that street, and he was interested in selling. So he then connected us up with the rest of the street, and we basically door knocked through the connection of the person on the street, and spoke to the rest of the neighbours on the street to see who was interested in amalgamating the land. We started off with about 6 properties, and people get a bit greedy with what they wanted for the house, and the whole project wasn't feasible. Then we end up with 2, so from 6 blocks to 2 blocks. Then with the 2 blocks with each on a house on it, so 2 houses, 2 blocks, and we negotiate an option on the development. The actual price took about a couple of weeks to agree on, but to negotiate the option contract took 6 months because solicitors wants to make sure that everyone is protected, and when they do that, you have to renegotiate certain terms, and the actual price took a couple of weeks, but the terms took 6 months to get it sorted. But at the end, it did go through. So 6 months to negotiate the option, then about 18 months to get the DA because it got knocked back a few times, and we even end up going to IHAP, which is a independent hearing panel in council, because we were the first on the street to do townhouses on that street. We did end up getting what we wanted, but it was a bit delayed. So with that one, we're currently negotiating with a few developers as to who would want to come in and take on the project with us. So it'll be a JV if the negotiations go through well.
Okay. Can I just take a step back? I've got quite a few questions to ask you there.
Are
you able to share some of the basics about the option terms?
Yep. So the option terms, it was a 1.5% option fee that we paid, 18 months contract. But look, I think there's no norm. I think a lot of people say, the norm is like 2% or whatever. I've heard people have done 1% even. But it's up to you to negotiate that. For us, we were able to get 1.5%. It was 18 months. Trying to remember what else. It was in terms of we wanted vacant possession was one thing, because as soon as you finish, as soon as they move out, you want to be able to start construction straight away. Something that's quite important. Although one of them had a tenant in it, so we had to negotiate the terms to allow them to give them time if we were going to exercise it to get the tenants out on time. What were the other terms? It took a while to negotiate in terms of, I guess, the penalty. I remember this was a bit of the deal almost fell over because of the penalty. But because there were 2 parties, we argued that should one party could not settle, that no one is to charge late penalty, for example. But the solicitor on one or the other property said that, well, then my client is going to get penalized. It's going to lose on opportunity costs. That it's not their fault that it's late. So that took a while to negotiate, where we had to try and understand what is it that they're concerned about. And in the end, they were concerned about the fact that they're losing rental income because if their tenant has moved on because they were going to give us vacant possession, they were going to be losing out on money. So in the end, we agreed on if we were late, they could walk away after 4 weeks so that their losses are cut short. So we agreed on that, had to meet in the middle in the end, because they understand that we can't be penalized on something and could drag on forever with late settlement. So that was one thing that I remember it took a while to get over the hurdle.
Yeah.
So that was just one of many that we had to negotiate. But at the end of the day, it was really trying to understand exactly what was the concern from the vendor. And that was, for this particular one, it was that concern. So we had to try and negotiate that back and forth through the solicitors.
I was about to ask that, whether you were talking directly to the vendors or whether it was going through intermediaries.
Yeah, it was a funny one. We actually negotiated directly with the vendors. So one of the vendors is overseas and one is here. So we actually, one of the vendors, the hard one, we negotiated through emails, and we were negotiating all that in the beginning, all fine. But when the solicitors got involved, one of the solicitor did not want their client to be negotiating directly with us. So he wanted us to go through our solicitor and their solicitor. So that makes it a little bit harder as well, because you're not sure whether the information was being conveyed correctly as well.
Yes. Yep.
Yep. So, I mean, we even got an angry email from the solicitor to say, please do not contact my client again. Contact me directly. So you got to have to walk on eggshells sometimes to try and satisfy all parties, especially solicitors, because they could break the deal. Although I have a lot of respect for them, but sometimes some of them do, break the deal for all of us. But for this particular one, we had to deal with the solicitors. But you just have to take it case by case basis.
And with the solicitor that you used, was that a specialist in terms of doing options, or how did you come across them, or had you been using them for a while?
We have been using this particular solicitor for a while, but before we did the option, we made sure that he had experience in doing options before we proceeded, because nothing worse than if they don't understand the option, that's just not going to help. But yeah, we knew option was something that the solicitor had to have experience in before they could do it.
And how did you confirm that they did have that experience? You said you took a bit of time making sure they did. How did you do that?
It was actually the solicitor that we have been using for a while. We have been using for the last 10 years. So when we spoke to him, he actually referred us to his partner. So it's the same firm, but it's a different solicitor in that firm, and he vouched that his partner's done it before. So I guess for us, we trusted the solicitor for the last 10 years, so we can only go by his word. It's not like they're going to give you a document to say they've done it. End of the day, really, it's you got to trust some of the consultants, or you could trust some of your friends' referral, and sometimes they don't even work out right.
Yes, a referral is good, but it's not always a guarantee that it's going to be perfect, because it comes back to your personal interactions, and things can happen. You can have a clash of personalities, all sorts of things that can go on. Okay, so then you mentioned that you had some difficulties getting the DA. Can you talk us through what those challenges were?
Yeah, so I think the actual DA was fine. The council was very supportive of it from day one. But the problem was one of the neighbours. So one of the neighbours actually wanted to sell us his site, but there was actually an easement over the land. So we told him that we can't amalgamate your land with our two lands, because there is no financial benefit in taking one more. It's either we take either we take 2 or 4. We can't do 3. 3 and 2 is just, there's no big financial benefit. So we told him we couldn't do it, and I think there was a little bit of a sour grape in that scenario. So because of that, he was lobbying really hard against the DA. He turned up at every council meeting. I'm not sure where he got his architect from to write a long letter attacking every single thing on the town planner's report. It's because he's not a town planner. He's actually a real estate agent. So they're not that technical, but the type of letter that he wrote was so technical, you knew it came from either a town planner or architect. So I don't know where he got a professional to actually write that very technical letter to council and really hammered the DA. And because of that, council had to tread very carefully because it's the first one on the street. They don't want too many complaints because that will set a precedence as well for the rest of the street. Because of that, we got knocked back the first time. And because we not got knocked back, we have to go to IHAP, which is an independent hearing. And then from the independent hearing, we got knocked back to do more things because usually when you're at those panels, they're even stricter with what you can and cannot do. We were actually complying mostly, but council can still have their discretion in regards to put more trees there, put more screening, even though we have enough screening, but they want you to put more there, for example. So it's to their discretion. And another problem with IHAP is that they get filled up very quickly, even though they have the meeting once a month. So even though we have the meeting, say, in June, it's not like you could go to the next IHAP meeting in July. They might be filled up June, July, August or September, and then you can't go to the next one until 3 or 4 months later. So again, that delays your whole DA. So that is another added complexity to the delay. So those were the challenges, but those were things that you couldn't have planned for. You know, we knew we had a good architect who knew the rules. We're 99% complying, and council was in support of it from day one. But it was these things that came into play, and you just had to prepare for it.
And what size land are you talking about here?
It's just over 1,100 square meters for 6 townhouses,
So
underground parking.
the consolidated lots? Or
Yep.
Yep. Okay. And so what happened? What was the outcome there? You ended up getting your approval?
Yeah, we did eventually get our approval because from the very beginning, we were complying. It was a matter of time that we were going to get that approval, but it was just the particular person on the street lobbying and getting people to sign petitions, and council just had to be strict and show that they're doing everything they can to make sure that they've addressed every single concern that the neighbours had. So we did get it in the end. So now we're just working through with other developers as a joint venture.
And so what are you looking for there with the joint venture?
Because it's a slightly bigger development than we used to, and it's also underground parking, so it's higher risk there. So we are looking for an experienced developer, and we are speaking to a few now and hopefully leverage off their expertise as well.
Okay, good. Well, hopefully you find someone.
Yeah. So we're in talks with them, yeah.
Oh, great. And then what about the big one? 49
Yeah, so that
units?
one, fingers crossed we're going to lodge the DA either today, if not tomorrow. That one there, it was originally a site for a unit block. But with the market downturn at the moment, we have to change direction. And that's actually the case for a lot of other developers as well. There's a slowdown in unit developments. So we had to then make a decision on what's the best use of that land. And after speaking to the local architect, he suggested that boarding house is probably the way to go. And that's how we've gone down the path of boarding houses. So with the boarding house, it's going to be, the site is 1,000, just over 1,000 square meters. And it's 20 meters frontage, so it's quite a wide, flat block. And we're going to be putting 49 new generation self-contained boarding houses on there. It's in Canterbury as well. So again, an area that we're very familiar with. We know the demographic. We know it's very close to Sydney City Central, and also very close to a few shopping hubs as well. So it's a good location and only about maybe 15 minutes walk to the train station. So the site's a good site. In terms of the DA, so far we haven't had too many hiccups. I guess it's still early days and I'm prepared for it. We know nothing is smooth sailing, but I'm confident that with the architect that I've engaged, that he should know what he's doing. He knows the process. It's not the first time he's done boarding houses in that particular council. He's done many. So he knows exactly what to do. And I've also spoken to real estate agents that has sold a lot of his sites that's done by him, not his site, but clients' sites that's done by this same architect. And they know of him. And I guess it's reassuring that I found someone that they've described as gun in the industry. There's nothing again, even from a referral or I found him from a DA document, nothing is guaranteed whether or not they're good consultants. So I'm thankful that I found him and fingers crossed things go our way next couple of months.
And so when you to say a self-contained boarding house, what does that look like? How's that different to say an apartment and who does it serve? Who would be the end buyer or the resident?
So I think with New South Wales, it's probably the only state that has this one. They call it the new generation boarding house. So the government is encouraging people to build boarding houses that has their own bathroom and kitchenette, hence the word self-contained. So the easiest way to explain it is probably mini studios. So because you're building and lodging a development under a boarding house legislation, you can get more floor space ratio and a lot of concessions that you get from the planning rules because you're meant to be affordable. So the rooms can be as small as 16 square meters or even smaller. I've seen ones that are smaller to about 30 square meters. But mine are about 20 to 25 square meters, so they're quite generous in size. It's like a normal unit studio, but the only difference is between a boarding house self-contained to a normal unit studio is that you could sell the studios. So you could sell them down as strata, but a boarding house, you couldn't strata them. It's a built to rent model. So it's quite popular at the moment in New South Wales because it's generating high yields. So you could either build it, take it all the way to build and then sell it, or you could keep it. Or you could get the DA and just sell it off to another developer who wants to build it and sell it. So it's quite flexible at which stage you actually want to cash out. So at this stage, our plan is to sell it. So we are working very closely with the architect to make sure that it's a very sellable DA-approved site. Or even if we want to build it ourselves, it's still going to be a very cost-effective build for us personally, and then sell it after we build it, or we could keep it. So many exit strategies.
So it's kind of like a motel room, similar sort of size and layout.
Yeah. Like almost like a hotel. Some of them I've seen even furnish them to feel like a hotel, and then you attract. Now the thing is with boarding houses as well, when people hear the word boarding houses, usually the neighborhood would lobby against it because they go, it's drugs and unemployed, that sort of thing. I think in the past, you have to agree with that to a certain extent because a lot of people that's unemployed, drug use and all that attract that sort of people into boarding houses. But these days with boarding houses, we get a lot of, singles where they just need a room that's clean. They don't necessarily, and a lot of them are coming from living out of state, just coming, and they just need a room to work Monday to Friday, and then they go back for the weekends, for example. So these are proper people, proper professionals with good jobs, wanting a safe and clean and new place to live in. So these will be the type of tenants that you'll be getting in as well. And also another distinction that have to be made is it's also different to an affordable house. So with affordable living, you actually have to give a set of units to the government, then they would actually rent it out at below 30% below market rent. But with boarding houses, you don't get that restriction. So you are actually in full control of how much you actually want to rent it out. Obviously, you're not going to be getting the same as if it was, say, a strata unit block, but it'll be pretty close. The reason you're not going to get as much because you are feeding a lot of people in that one block versus, say, an apartment building. You're going to obviously have maybe a pool, a gym, that sort of stuff. But with the boarding houses, you're cramming a lot of people into that one block. But if you're not going to be silly and put 13 square meter rooms, then you still feel quite luxurious in a 25 square meter room. So if you go to IKEA, they actually furnish a 25 square meter room, and it actually feels quite luxurious.
And how many levels are you talking about?
For my particular development, it's 3 levels plus an attic. So you're not going to see the 4th level. It's going to be a setback. But that's because my area is an R4. You can actually build units on it. Whereas other people, they might be only able to do a single level or a double story, for example. But mine is actually going to look like, outside it's going to look like a unit block, but it's actually all boarding houses and all studios inside.
Oh, interesting. And you said you found your architect because they had done a project across the road that went to court. Why did it go to court? How did that all work out?
They were trying to obviously push the envelope. So I mentioned earlier about the affordable housing. So when you build I'm not sure about other states, but in New South Wales, when you build a block of units, you obviously have to comply with, floor space ratio, whether it's a 0.9 to 1, for example. But if you actually build a portion of it for affordable housing, so basically this is say a portion of your 100 units, unit block, you set aside for affordable housing. So you give it to the government for 10 years to rent out below market price, you will actually get 0.5 additional floor space ratio for your development. So for a lot of developers, they actually take advantage of that concession. But to go that far, usually council are not usually too happy about that because you're pushing the envelope. So then they take it to court, and usually, depending on how good the lawyer is and the architect is, and they would then help you get it through and get that additional floor space ratio.
Okay, that's interesting. And it's quite a diverse group of projects that you've got there, Davina. I'm interested in how your mindset in terms of coping with that change and dealing with different projects, because it's not like you're doing a 6 townhouse project, then moving on to another 6 townhouse project. They're all quite different. So how do you cope with the risk and the anxiety of doing different projects?
I think for us, we've always been about growth. So we started off doing cosmetic renovation, and then we moved up to structural, and then we moved up to, say, a 1:2 subdivision, and then 1:2 subdivision. The next stage was going to be, townhouses, more than 2. For the boarding houses, that wasn't something that we originally planned. It was meant to be a block of units because we wanted to go from 6 townhouses to units. So it may seem that we're kind of like doing a lot of different other projects, but if I take you through that, what I just said, the journey is actually growing project by project, because if we can take it all the way to the maximum limit, then you can only aim that high, and if you can't, then you just fall back a little bit and then you keep trying. So that's been how we grow. But in terms of doing smaller projects, we are still doing those smaller projects, so the 1:2, because they are lower risk and the reward is just as good. In fact, we're actually doing one at the moment, working on the DA 1:2, and that's something that we would be concentrating on as, I guess you can say, our bread and butter. But the larger projects like the townhouses and the boarding houses would be our ad hoc projects. When the right deal comes along, we just have to adapt. We can't sit there and go, no, that site was for units. I'm just going to do unit. I'm not going to look at boarding houses. So we have to be flexible and listen to, what the consultants are telling us, what the market is demanding. So that's how it all came about. But in terms of bread and butter, that's the 1:2, the subdivisions.
And so did you say you had multiple types or multiple numbers of those kind of projects going, or is it just
So, I talked about the 6 townhouses. We're in the process of speaking to a JV partner that's more experienced. And then with the townhouses, that's really just paper pushing at the moment. So there's not too much stress there. And then the 1 into 2 subdivisions, we intend to do a few more of those because they're smaller and less risky projects. So that one's currently going through a DA. We just secured that under an option just before Christmas. In this marketplace with the Sydney slowdown, it's actually a great time to negotiate hard on terms, and that's what we did with this small site. Usually with small sites, it's quite hard to negotiate options with vendors, but given the current market condition, they want the price that they want. So then that's when you go in and go, well, okay, I'll give you the price, but I want more than 1 year option or long-term settlement. And usually they will come around to it, and they're more willing to listen as well because they know the market is slow and that's the only way for them to get the price. So we got, I guess, lucky. We're able to secure that also under an option. So all in all, at the moment, I'm working on 3 deals. So hoping to do more of the 1 into 2 subdivision because that's our bread and butter. But if there's a bigger deal that comes along and it looks good, I can always be reaching out to other people in my network to see whether they want to come in and joint venture with me, and we go at it as well. So I think if there's a good opportunity, I think there's always someone that would look at it with you.
Yep. And you've touched on the fact that the Sydney market has softened. What's your view on that? How are you responding? What do you think's going to happen? What are you feeling about some of the stock that you may have coming up?
I'm actually feeling quite excited and slightly thankful that there is a bit of a slowdown. I remember a couple of years ago when the market was hot, it's actually very scary because when the market is so hot and it just keeps going up, there could be what they call a bubble. I know they say, oh, there's never going to be a bubble, but when it's so hot and people are just paying crazy prices, you're just asking for it, that there will be a crash. So I'm kind of thankful that there has been a bit of a pullback. And with that pullback, it means that I can go in and start negotiating deals. I remember it was really hard to get deals when the market is hot because vendors are not interested in talking to you terms. They just want their price. There's no way they're going to give you a 10-day cooling off period. They'll go, no, someone else will come along and give them that price. So to me, the slowdown is actually a good time to accumulate and negotiate very hard on terms. And we look forward to actually this year to take advantage of that slowdown and try and get more deals under our belt and then launch a DA. And hopefully by the time the market recovers, we've already acquired the deals. The DA is ready to go and we're ready to build. But of course, no one's got a crystal ball how long this slowdown is going to be. But you work that into your feasibility to make sure that you're not inflating your price. You've got to be very conservative with your sale price as well.
Okay. And you mentioned that you're very focused on growth and you want to keep getting bigger. What's the big vision? What's the limit? What are the biggest projects, or where do you see yourself headed to?
To be perfectly honest, because I don't have a mentor that's in the development industry, like an established company, for example. So I can't say I know exactly what that looks like. What I do know is you just have to keep growing, and to do that without getting too hammered. I know that, with development, there are risks and there are times where there will be setbacks, but you're just going to make sure that you limit your risks, have a lot of exit strategies. So for us, what it looks like is, like I mentioned before, at the moment, to me, we continue to do the 1 into 2 subdivisions. That's our bread and butter because we feel comfortable and confident with those deals. And with that confidence, we are also bringing other joint venture and money partners with us along the journey. And also because they're lower risk. And then the larger deals will be the ad hoc ones where if someone approaches us for those bigger deals, we might look at it if they're good. But that will be on an ad hoc basis. It won't be something that I'll be actively seeking, for example. So that's where I'm at the moment in terms of where I see myself in 10 years' time, potentially doing more of what I'm currently doing. But who knows, right? As long as you keep growing, I think you can't go too wrong.
And what do you think you've learned about yourself along the way?
Um, I surprisingly, I can think and act a lot better under pressure. It sounds really weird, but sometimes I think back even with the build when I had issues with the builder. That was really stressful time when he couldn't finish the build, and also the time when we nearly couldn't get the option through from one of the townhouses, and we were really under pressure to come up with a solution. And you think back and you go, oh, how did you come up with the idea? And I can only think that when you know the situation arrived and backed me into a corner, I really had to think hard to try and come up with a solution. And I think when I'm under pressure, I actually do quite well. Having said that, I probably one shouldn't always be under pressure because otherwise you're not going to enjoy the journey.
Well, and what do you reckon is the most difficult business decision you've had to make along the way?
The most difficult one was probably the most stressful one, and that's the one I mentioned earlier with the builder. So we were quite up to our necks with repayments and debt for the subdivisions, and the builder had issues with his other development. But regardless of that, he still pushed for us to pay him about, at the time, $15,000 as final payment without finishing the work. So you can imagine, being at that point where, do you pay him $15,000 so that he would finish the work, or take him to court to argue to say, I don't agree with you that you finished, so I'm not paying you the $15,000. But to do that, it's going to cost me $20,000 to go to court. And on top of that, paying interest on a development site that is not finished. And on top of that, he actually stopped work and locked us out of our development. Look, we actually in really good relationship with this builder in a different development, but he was just in a really bad space because he was going through court in another development. But so he affected us. So I remember that time, I was actually 7 months pregnant, and when he did that to us, it was quite a kick in the gut, locking us out from our own site. And luckily for us, it wasn't our home. It was actually a deal, just a development site. But if it was someone's home, I think that person would be quite emotionally drained. So in the end, we made the decision to pay him the $15,000 and not go to court, and hope that he would do the right thing. So I think luckily for us, he did eventually get everything done, get us the certificates that we needed. And then we were able to then submit that to our private certifier and get the OC. But you see, that could have worked out very differently, where he would run away. I mean, what can we do then? Come up with another 20,000 to go to court to go after him. So that was quite stressful because he could have sent us broke. Can you imagine paying for interest for property, as well as that trying to fund a court case if we were to go after him? So that's one of the ugly side of development, and it nearly broke us. We nearly said, we don't want to do this again. But after we, went through it, and we got the product on the market, had it furnished, all nice, ready to go, sold it. Then we think back and go, okay, well, next time we got to make sure that we have a good contract. But again, good contract may not necessarily protect you from that either, right? Contract is just a piece of paper, really. You still got to go to court. So after you pass it, you gather up your courage again, you just keep going. So, but we've gone through that. But at least it's on the bright side. It was on a small deal. I can't imagine doing that, but in a multi-million-dollar deal.
Yes, that would be uber stressful, I can imagine.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm keen to get your views on women in property development, or more specifically, female property developers. I mean, on my show, the vast majority of guests that I have are males. So I'm just curious about your view on why there aren't more women developers, how more could get involved. What's your thinking on that? How do you find being a female property developer?
Well, about maybe 7-10 years ago, when I first started in property renovations, structural renovations, there was definitely a boys' club. I tried to form relationships with the tradies so that you could help you out with certain things, or to at least help you understand what's going on. And it was very hard to form that relationship. So I didn't force it. So what I did was I just played to my strength. I put myself in the background and be the organizer, and I pushed my husband to do more the FaceTime with the builders and let him build what they call the bromance with the tradies. And if I wanted something done, I will push my husband there and say, "Can you ask them to get that done?" And things like that. So they seem to be more okay if the instructions came from a man versus from a woman about 7-10 years ago. But look, I think now has changed a bit. I think the landscape has changed, and I do see a lot more women doing developments, whether it's renovation, structural, or whatnot. And I think that's probably to do with some of the female leaders that have been in the industry. So one that I could think of is Cherie Barber. I'm sure you know of Cherie Barber. And also The Block as well. They showcase a lot of women taking leadership roles. I think more of that, people give women the courage to go out there and think, I can do this too, and I'm not intimidated. Because I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was intimidated. So I decided that I'm going to take the behind the scenes role. But now I actually go on site. So the project I talked about where we had issues with the builder, I actually went on site and put up butcher's paper onto the windows. I had timetables with tick boxes on them, and I managed through them on site that way. I don't think I'll be able to do that 7-10 years ago, because they would have been quite defensive because it came from a woman, I feel. But I think now it's a bit better. But I think it will get better given the more and more women coming into the scene and empowering other women along the way. And I think it will just be better for the industry to get more women in it, because I think a more balanced view, and the culture will definitely change. The culture in the building industry, a bit of a boys' club, so you can imagine, it could be a bit rough, and even jokes can be boys-centric. So I think to have more women, it would definitely be more welcoming to other women to come into the industry.
Well, 50% of the end buyers market out there are female, so it makes sense to have a more fair representation of them during the development process, I would have thought.
Mm.
And I wanted to ask you about the name of your company. So it's Favela Developments. Is there some symbolism, or what's the reasoning for the name of the company?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you know the word favela in the ghettos in South America. So basically, the huge ghettos where it's like a whole hill full of those very poor people with very derelict houses. That area is actually called favelas. So my husband actually went on a trip there, and when he came back, he said, "Oh, why don't we call our business Favela Developments? Because that's what we do. We look for derelict homes, tired homes, and we transform them." And that's how favela, the name favela, came about. But we actually started off as Favela Renovations, and then we evolved, and now we also operate under the name of Favela Developments. And yeah, so that's how it came about.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how that works out, having a partner that's in the business with you. How do you go having a partner? I mean, you're business partners, but because a lot of people often will email me and say, oh, their wife or their husband, they want to do development, or they're into property, but their partner isn't, and their partners are fearful of them getting involved or the risks involved, and they feel that it holds them back.
Yeah, I can understand that. Look, I think I'm pretty lucky that my husband actually also like property, and we complement each other's skill set. I think the key for us was the complementing each other's skill set. So I can negotiate, but I may not be very forceful, for example. So I'll come up with all these ideas in the background, and then I'll send my husband in to negotiate. I think sometimes when it comes from a man, sometimes people take you more seriously with the solicitors. Again, back to the whole, what role does a woman play? It's not like I don't think women can do it. I think women can do it, but for me, I think, well, I've got a man here. I might as well utilize him and send him in with the persona that looks like a developer. So, and I'm also, I do a lot of research as well. So I read a lot. So reading through the DAs I mentioned earlier is not something my husband do as well. So I do that. And then he'll do something else. He'll maybe go on site and manage the builders or the tradies, for example, and I might do something else. So we play to our strengths. So that way we don't get into arguments. So I will trust him in certain things and he'll trust me in certain things. So we don't overlap. It's the same thing like organizing our wedding. I know he doesn't like to organize certain things, so I'll do it and I'll just say, well, you just turn up. And we had no arguments for the wedding, because that's how people don't end up getting to weddings, because they have arguments with the organization. So I think that could maybe that could be how it managed to work out so many years. And I am thankful to have him as a business partner. And we talk, and because of that, we're also able to live and breathe property. We would, anywhere we are in the car, whatever, we're always brainstorming what our next stage is, next strategy, next negotiation, that we're pretty lucky in that sense.
Yes, I can imagine that would be beneficial. I think my wife would get quickly bored of me talking about developing. I know she does.
Yeah, so I'm very, very thankful for that, yeah.
Oh, awesome. And how do you keep learning and innovating, or what do you do to seek inspiration for your developments?
I like to go to open houses. I think that's the best way to keep updated. So I like to concentrate in a particular suburbs and know exactly who's buying your product. So I would go to open homes to see what's selling really well and try and take inspiration from that. That's one way of doing it. And the second one is I keep attending courses, even though I might be attending a course and they'll be telling me some things that I already know, but there will always be one thing that you'll pick up that will benefit hugely in what you already do. So I guess in the past, we were a bit tight where we couldn't afford to invest too much on education. But given that we've been quite lucky with a few of our profitable deals, we're now actively investing back in a lot more education. And we're not just investing in education specifically on developments. We'll be doing education on, say, rooming accommodation, Airbnbs, because the marketplace is always changing. And I do think you need to adapt in order to know what's going on as well. So, and the third thing is, and I also network. So by networking, people will tell you where the new courses are. In fact, I found you through another person that I know through the property network. I think networking is such a powerful thing to have, where people can actually tell you that there's more out there, there's better out there. So that's how I continue learning. And in the last couple of months, I've been doing a lot of that, and that's really exponentially helped me learn a lot.
Oh, fantastic. So if you could then go back in time and talk to yourself, what age would you go back to, and what would you say to Davina? And why?
That's a hard one. I would say I would go back to when maybe about 10 years ago, when I had the opportunity to do a secondment. So I remembered back when I work in the financial industry. I currently still work full-time, or you can say 4 days a week, where I had the opportunity to go to a different department in banking. And I went into credit risks, which is good. I learned about credit and the risk. But had I gone through, say, a secondment for a couple of months in, say, development finance, I think that would have opened a lot of doors for me. I would have been able to work in a development finance company, a mezzanine finance company, and I think that would help me immensely today in development, because I think funding is actually quite an important part of development if you were to move forward. And I think a lot of huge development companies are able to move forward and grow is because they've got that right.
And it's interesting that you touched on finance. Do you have any exposure to the lending market at the moment, or how are you funding projects?
With funding the projects in the past, we've done it all ourselves, and we've been lucky enough to come across one or two money partners that supported us in the last 7 to 10 years. But that only limits us to say one or two deals. But to do more deals, we would need to get more, to learn to work with more, whether it's a joint venture partner or a money partner. So I guess this year we are being more open to working together with other people in order to move forward in terms of plugging the gap, I guess, in funding. I have worked closely with my mortgage broker, understanding how commercial development finance work as well. I spend a lot of time trying to understand how things work in different scenarios, because by doing that, you could help yourself a lot better. That's what I realized when doing residential funding in retail for my renovations, that when you understand funding and how it works, you can actually present certain deals and how to structure it to your broker, and then they will go away and ask the bank whether they can do it. But if you don't take the time to understand funding, you're at the mercy of the broker of what they can offer to you in terms of loans. So I think funding is actually quite a very important thing to understand. I do feel that I have a lot more to learn. I've only learned it through my broker, but had I worked in the funding industry, I think I'll have an even more competitive edge. But look, I don't regret where I am today. I'm sure that by missing out on that, I'm doing something else. So you make do what you have now.
Awesome. So what would you say is your top tip for other developers out there who'd be looking to take their business to the next level?
I'm tempted to share a lot of tips, but I'm just going to keep it short. The first one, it's a tip that was given to me by another very successful developer in Malaysia, and we had a chat, and he knew I was getting into development, and his one-line word to me in Chinese was basically persevere and it's yours. To explain that, it basically means that if you have the perseverance to go through it, success will eventually come to you. So when he said that to me, when things got tough, I remember those words, and you just have to keep persevering and it will eventually come, because it will come to those who persevere. So I still live and breathe those words that he's told me. The second one is it's also from very, I guess, she's not a developer, but she's quite a successful professional. And she's told me that in order for her to be successful, she never takes no for an answer. She would keep pushing and challenging. And that actually helped me with my subdivision. You know, remember when I spoke about when I got knocked back from council once, my town planner and architect actually said to me, oh, well, maybe we should just go to plan B and just renovate the house. Don't subdivide. I don't think council's going to approve it. But I remember her saying that don't take no for an answer, try again. So because of that, we tried again and I got the subdivision through. So until today, I still live and breathe those words. You know, no is not the final answer. You just have to keep finding out what the issue is, whether it's a vendor that you haven't addressed their needs, and for the council, that what is it they really want you to build. So I think those are the two most important things that's helped me throughout the journey.
Yes, well, I spoke to a former FBI hostage negotiator who wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, and he was of the view that no is just a good starting point for a negotiation.
Yeah, but when you're inexperienced, sometimes no, you can think, oh, okay, I'm not going to bother you anymore. So I guess with experience, you learn that, you know, you can keep going forward and keep negotiating.
All right, you got any others there you want to share, or you can stick to those two?
Other things, I guess, fundamental. I I guess when someone used to tell me, oh, find a mentor and before you go on this journey, it's quite difficult to go up to someone and go, hey, can you be my mentor? I found that that's not the right approach because is a bit in someone's face. So what I've done is I actually go and network and have coffee catch-ups with a lot of people who is experienced. As far as those that were old school developers that was introduced to me by my father. So he was a solicitor and had clients who was a developer. So he's really old school developer, and just sitting down with him and seeing what he does and the advice that they tell you. You can also feel the energy as well. So you look up to those and, you call them your mentors because they may not do exactly what you do, but you can live and breathe the experience, the energy, and that helps you through your journey. And then try seeking out more other mentors, whether it's mentors in learning. So I have a lot of different type of mentors in order to keep learning in the development journey. And also with mentors as well, keep you accountable. So you can't really go and meet them, have a coffee catch up, and then the next year you walk down the road, they go, oh, what are you doing? And you're like, oh, I quit. You kind of like, oh, you don't want to do that. They kind of keep you accountable, and you got to keep going. So that's one good way to keep going, and that someone is there to support you as well.
Excellent. Well, there's some great ideas there, Davina. Well, if people are interested in finding out more about you or the business, where should they go?
They could contact me on Facebook on my personal profile, Davina Wong, or they could jump on to Favela Development, or even on my website, www.faveladevelopment.com, where I have put all my previous portfolio of work, as well as some of the media that I've been on, like magazines, where we've gone on to House and Home Garden, talking about women in property as well, actually. And then we've also got our house featured on some domain magazines as well. So they can find out about that, and if it's something that they're interested in, reach out. I'm more than happy to share some ideas with them, or if they want to work together, I'm open to that as well.
Wonderful. Well, Davina, I've really enjoyed talking to you about your property development journey. It's been certainly an interesting pathway, and I wish you all the best for your future projects. I'm sure they're going to be exciting.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks for being on the Property Developer Podcast.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Okay, there you go. I thought that was a pretty fascinating conversation with Davina. What an unusual range of projects she has tackled. Here's 3 things I took away from our chat. 1. Don't be afraid to pivot if things change. I thought it was great that Davina was prepared to change her approach when she decided that the market had shifted and units were no longer the right product type, and she pivoted to getting a permit for a boarding house, a completely different project. This shows a willingness to be flexible and adapt to what the market wants. 2. Understand your risk tolerance. Davina discussed how she is looking to partner with a more experienced developer to help complete one of her projects, because she understands that she doesn't have the experience to comfortably complete the project. I think it is a wise move to partner up and mitigate the risk. This shows an awareness of your risk tolerance, but is also a clever way to learn how to complete a particular type of project, but in a safer way. 3. Be prepared to try new things. Now, you certainly cannot accuse Davina of sticking to what she knows best. She has been prepared to try new strategies, work the angles, and explore different options if Plan A doesn't work out. It certainly shows that there is more than one way to develop property, and lots of opportunities exist out there if you're prepared to go looking for them. Alright, if you enjoyed that fascinating conversation, then why not delve back into the back catalogue and catch episode 27 of the show, where I spoke with Canadian-based developer Dan Barona about some of the unique challenges he faces developing in Ottawa.
And it was one of the coldest winters and snowiest winters on record. When my electrician showed up, he couldn't pull the cable because the vinyl on the cable was cracking every time he'd unroll the cable.
Dan also shares how he moved from renovating properties to doing multi-unit developments. There's lots of good stuff in that conversation, so tune in to episode 27 of the show. Don't forget to catch me on Insta and Facebook for all my latest project pics and videos, industry news and other fun tidbits. You can also post a comment on iTunes if you're enjoying the show. And of course, all the past episodes of the show can be found at propertydeveloperpodcast.com. So until next time, keep your options open for that next sweet property deal.
You've been listening to the Property Developer Podcast. Tune in next time for more tips, ideas and inspiration to take your developing to the next level. For more developing love, make sure to visit propertydeveloperpodcast.com.